All right. Let's jump in and get started. So, I'm going to spend a little bit of time today just kind of talking about a few topics that have come up recently in some previous chats and wanted to have a little bit of discussion around those. The first one is going to be when learning stops feeling exciting. Ooh, if I could talk. The quiet phase of learning something new is probably the best way to put it. So, if coding ever felt exciting when you first started out, and I hope it has because you shouldn't have been doing it if you weren't excited about it. But do you remember when it used to be fun to learn to code and then all of a sudden it wasn't so fun? It felt more like a chore. That process didn't mean that you were falling behind or you weren't learning or you got worse at it. It actually meant that you were improving, you were growing. You see, when you're first starting to learn code, you are following tutorials, you're following guides, you're following courses, or maybe even the documentation. And those are going to have you do small beginner level exercises that come with immediate gratification. Typically, that means you're able to solve the issue, you're able to get something working, and you're able to complete whatever task it asks you to do. When you do that, that's going to give you a level of confidence, excitement, momentum that's going to help you keep going. But as you continue to learn and the complexity increases of what you're being asked to do, that level of excitement goes away. The type of projects that you'll be making in the beginning are going to only increase as you continue further along, and you're not going to have that same level of immediate gratification that you used to have. So, what exactly do you do when you are struggling? So, what exactly do you do when you need to keep pushing, but you're not having the same level of fun that you used to? Well, that's what I want to talk about in this video. So in the beginning, everything is brand new. Excuse me. Let me make sure my mic is good. Hold on a second there. So look, that initial excitement that you feel in the beginning, that's something that you're going to feel in everything that is new to you, whether it's a relationship, a new job, a new vehicle, a new home, clothes. Everything is exciting in the beginning. That's part of things being new. That's part of you doing something or getting something that you are happy about. And that's going to bring a level of excitement. But over time, that honeymoon phase starts to phase out, and there's has to be something deeper that's going to keep you connected to whatever it is that you're doing or whatever it is that you have. This is no different in the coding space as well. Yes, when you first start out you're learning something new, you're getting immediate gratifications, toast notifications, bells, positive reinforcement. All of those things are going to be there, but as the learning continues, those things start to dwindle down, and you're not going to get that immediate recognition of success or accomplishment. This is where you have to realize that the learning and the exposure, this is where you have to realize that you're not speaking so much, or you're not dealing so much with just being exposed to code, but you're actually learning and you're starting to pick up some depth. Being able to add up a variable of two numbers and get a number return with a simple function, that's something that is great. But that's really exposure level learning. That's really just introducing you to whatever programming language that it is that you're using. What you're starting to develop as time progresses is an actual depth with learning something at a deeper level. And with depth, that's going to require more complexity, and it's going to require you to start to compound the things that you previously learned to include into what you are being introduced now, so that you can demonstrate the capability of stacking those small wins into something medium sized, into something larger, so that your projects start to be a little bit more meaningful. You're starting to gain a little bit more depth in the programming language that you're learning, or whatever task that you're looking to improve. And it's something that you really should, a process that you have to find ways to maintain that excitement and that momentum about, because again, no one's going to give you a pat on the back every time you do something successful as your learning continues. The same thing excuse me, that you'll experience in school, grade school, growing up. You get a lot of immediate gratification in the beginning, but as time progresses, that immediate gratification tends to dwindle down. You have to figure out what's inside of you that's going to keep you going and keep you doing things that are repetitive, because those are the things that are typically the most rewarding. Doing the same thing, doing things in with a level of discipline, not relying so much on fun and excitement to get things done. That's really what's going to get you through. So when you think about it, you really want to find and think of ways to help you deal with the boredom that comes with learning. And as you're experiencing that boredom, don't allow that to give you the thought process that you're stagnant with your learning as well. Because a lot of times when you're learning something that might not be fun, or you might not have the most interest in, yes, it will be boring to you and you won't have a level of excitement, but that doesn't mean that you're staying stagnant. That just means that you're really digging in, and you're really in a space where you're disciplined enough to keep going, and you're going to work through the things that you need to work through in order to get to the end result that you ultimately want to be faced with. You see, as you're going along, what you're ultimately working towards as you find yourself continuing with this journey, what you're starting to realize is that there's a big difference between excitement and becoming a master of something. You see, that initial phase is going to be excitement. That's what's going to keep you going. That's what's going to have you looking forward to opening up your editor the next time it's time for you to sit down and code, the next time it's time for you to turn in an assignment, the next time it's time for you to participate in a codeathon with a friend or someone else that you may have just learned through online mechanism that you share the same common interests with. That's where the excitement is. But as you start to become more of a expert in the field or with whatever it is that you're learning, you're not going to always have that level of excitement. And that's where you have to recognize that there's a difference between the two. That, hey, I'm no longer in this fun phase, but I'm in a phase where I'm really getting a deeper understanding of what's going on. And my responsibility and expectations of me are going to change. Therefore, I have to convey to that in order to make sure I'm keeping up and I'm remaining productive and I'm remaining a skillful potential expert in this field, if you will. So as learning starts to feel less exciting to you, just remember that you're not broken, you haven't lost confidence, you aren't wasting your time. You're just in a phase that is becoming more meaningful, that isn't so flashy, that requires you to dig a little deeper and to work through different challenges that you may not have been faced with before. The people who get good at things aren't always excited to wake up and do different things on a day-to-day basis. You think about some of the experts in various fields, they're not always excited to get up and go to the gym or get up and work on their project or get up and work towards the empire that they're looking to build, but they do have the discipline to keep going day in and day out, no matter what comes up, no matter what challenges they face. They have a very good understanding of themselves and how to manage their emotions and recognize that in order for me to be successful, it's more important for me to be disciplined than it is for me to be excited about every little thing that I encounter. So I'll challenge you to find ways to maintain that level of accomplishment as the excitement starts to phase and that newness of whatever it is that you're learning starts to wear off. Find ways to keep yourself going. It could be something as simple as keeping track of the amount of hours or time that you spend with learning, that you start to set out small goals in the beginning of the week or the beginning of the day so that you can go back and look at what it is that you set out to do and you can mark it off. You can have that visual indicator that, hey, I got this done. I'm able to mark this through. Let me put a check box next to this. Maybe it is documenting your journey in a small habit tracker so you can go back and visually see how consistent you were, and you use that as your form of motivation and perseverance to keep you going when things aren't as exciting as they are when they first started out. So I love to hear all about your journey and things that you did to keep yourself going when learning something new was no longer fun. And just keep in mind that progress is still progress no matter what, regardless to how it shows up, regardless to what level of progression that you're making over the period of time. Don't compare yourself to others. Stay true to yourself. And always just remember, if I keep doing what it is that I'm supposed to do and I keep showing up, eventually these things are going to click and it's only going to get easier. Let's get this next one going here. Hope everyone's doing well out there today. Just want to stop in and talk about a few things that are on my mind that could be beneficial to someone else. Set this thing up. Everyone's doing pretty good out there. See what this looks like. Smooth this baby. I think that works there. So look, the next topic I want to speak about is inspired from someone that I was speaking with a few days ago in chat, and we were talking about when do you know that a tutorial is no longer enough. So one of the most scariest moments in learning is when that tutorial or that course ends and everything goes blank, and now you have to figure out what's next. So this usually takes place when you're following along with the online tutorial or some sort of a course, and it's asked you to complete certain things. And then once you get to the end of it, the instructor may or may not suggest that you look to add on to whatever it is that they've shown you, and you have to figure out and make that decision of what do I do next. If you've ever felt, if you've ever experienced this feeling before, I'd love to hear about it, because this is something that all of us have gone through, regardless to whether you were learning to code or learning to fix a car or build a house or whatever it is. Whenever someone gave you instructions and showed you what to do, and then they turned around and asked you to go out and complete this task on your own, there's a feeling of uncertainty and lack of confidence that we all experience and we all have gone through. Some of us were skillful and persevered enough to work through it, some of us not. But what I want to talk about now is how to work through, how to identify that feeling, how to work through it, and just some tactics that you can use to kind of help you in the future whenever you are learning something from a tutorial. What are those next steps? What are some things that you can do to help build that confidence so that you'll be ready to take the next step forward? So I remember finishing one of my very first tutorials that I followed on YouTube, and it was a CRUD project using the MERN stack. And no, actually, I'm lying. It was not using the MERN stack. It was a CRUD project using an Express server with an EJS front end. And I was displaying, I think it may have been a workout tracker or some sort of tracking application that was important to me at the time, and I figured it'd be pretty cool for me to build something that would work for me. That's what's always suggested. That's what inspired me to learn code. And I remember when the tutorial ended and the instructor was using React, and I struggled with installing React in the beginning. I always would install the React project in the same directory with my backend, and it always caused issues whenever I tried to run it. I could never get it working. So I said, forget using React. I'm just going to stick with EJS. So I was able to get the project working. I created all the CRUD functionality. I think I even gave the website a name. And the tutorial ended with CRUD, and I don't recall the instructor's name, but he did a very good job of kind of talking through how CRUD projects work and the process that you would need it in order to complete it. So the challenge for me at the time was to not use React, but to use EJS instead and figure out how I can use it to get the same UI effect that I wanted, because that's what I cared about the most at the time. And then I was focused on making sure that I had the CRUD functionality. And I'm telling you, once the project ended, although I did challenge myself to do something outside of what the project called for by using a different front end, if you will, application, man, I was lost as no one could even imagine. I didn't have a clue of what it is that I wanted to do next because the project wasn't my own and I was relying on a tutorial. And although I was relying on this tutorial and I picked up on things that worked for me and I walked away feeling really good about myself, I still kind of had this lost feeling as if it wasn't enough. And I didn't feel confident that I really had a good understanding of what was next for me. Although I felt comfortable building any sort of CRUD project at this point, all I needed was certain key things. And then once I did that, what does the UI visual look like? Do I include authentication? Et cetera, et cetera. So I was able to complete it just fine, but I still froze up at the end because I felt like once this tutorial was over, that's where my learning kind of stopped. I didn't know what was next for me, and no one actually told me what to do next. So this created a level of angst and uncertainty that really kind of impacted to an extent my confidence and my momentum with coding because I thought that this was it and I knew I wasn't ready to pick up on anything much more complex than this. Remember, I was having trouble with installing React in a separate directory than my Node server or my Express backend. And one day I started to realize that, hey, you know what? I need to really kind of understand and get a better handle on this because there has to be next steps to this. I'm just struggling with it, but I got to figure out how to kind of work through this because that's the only way I'm going to get to ultimately where it is that I want to go. So this was the moment that I realized that learning stopped being so much excuse me, this was the moment that I realized that learning stopped being so much about being told what's next and given instructions, and it started being more about making decisions and what's the right judgment. Part of my uncertainty in knowing what to do was that I feared that I would choose the wrong next step. And that wrong next step wasn't just what do I add on to this project in order to build out the next application or the next feature that I wanted. But the wrong next step for me at the time was that I'll be doing something to waste my time. So, for myself, and I don't know, and I'm sure a lot of you, we don't have a whole lot of time to spend with various things that don't contribute to whatever it is that we have going on in our world. So if we dedicate our time to something, yes, this is something that's fun and that we enjoy, but we're also looking to get a return on our investment. And what I didn't want to do was start down a path of learning something or trying to divulge my time into something that wasn't going to give me the return that I was looking for. So because I didn't know what it was that I wanted to do, I didn't have a very good understanding of what was next after I finished that tutorial. I felt lost and I almost felt as if, hey, maybe I should take a step away from this. Maybe the path that I'm going down isn't right for me. Maybe I need to leverage a curriculum from a school or some sort of institution and have more structure with my learning because me trying to do it on my own, I'm really running myself in circles and I'm not being as productive as I thought I could be or should be. And this was the point that I realized that I didn't necessarily uh, in during this journey. Ooh, if I could talk. During this journey, I realized that I didn't need another tutorial. I didn't need to waste my time trying to watch the 2.0 version or whatever it is that I was learning. I really needed to go ahead and get uncomfortable and venture out and start making things without so much guidance. And once I got comfortable and I realized that I needed to take my learning experience into my own hands and venture out and get more comfortable doing things without certain amount of guidance. So at this point in your learning journey, you don't need another tutorial. What you need is real confidence that you can trust and believe in your own thinking. You know, if you avoid building on your own, you're missing a critical step in learning, and tutorials are only going to take you so far. And this is where you really need to have that confidence in yourself, even if it's just to rebuild what you just learned. Have that confidence in yourself to work through this without someone else's guidance, so you can really get that compound interest, that muscle memory, that muscle work, if you will, at learning to think on your own, problem solving, connecting things together, and just completing out something that you set out to do. So if tutorials feel less helpful now than what they did previously, that's not a sign that there's something wrong with you. Congratulations. That's actually a promotion saying that you've graduated from this phase of learning and now it's time to transition into something else. Keep in mind on your journey that learning requires decisions and it requires you to make judgment calls. If you're not doing those two things along with solving problems, chances are you probably aren't learning in a very aggressive manner. You're doing something what people refer to as passive learning, and that's typically not the way that you want to learn if you're really looking to grow your career and become someone that can be relied upon from a developer perspective. So so you're not stuck. And if you are tired or you're not getting from tutorials what you thought you were previously, don't look at that as you're no longer good at coding. Look at it as something that you're progressing to do more. And now it's time to take a step out and move away from tutorials and start to build on your own. This transition isn't failure. This transition is natural and it's something that you should be proud of yourself of. Now go build something amazing. So that is going to lead me to my next topic that we're going to talk about. Let's go ahead and get this thing updated and catch up a little bit. Hello, hello. Hope everyone's doing well out there today. So, the next topic I want to talk about is why you may feel slower at coding, but technically you probably are smarter. So, I know a lot of times when we're coding, it may feel when we're moving slow, we're getting worse because we're not able to type as quickly or we're not able to think of different things as quickly as we would like. But that usually means that you are thinking and not necessarily that you are bad at doing something. So don't allow those two emotions to overlap and to cloud your judgment, if you will. Just because you're moving slower, it doesn't mean that you're worse at doing something. It just probably means that you're having to think, which is a good thing, and you're learning how to recall certain things without always relying upon assistance. Go get it if you need it, but you want to always start with you because you may not always have another source to reference from time to time when it's time to learn certain things. So let's talk about this phase of learning when things start to move a little slower and everything isn't as obvious and things aren't as fast as they used to be. See, that early learning phase is going to be fast because it's shallow. You're digesting new concepts visually, You're understanding what they may be saying. You may even be typing out some basic variables, some basic loops, learning the different data structure types. But that's not where learning actually takes place. Usually, when you're truly learning something, that process is typically slower, and there's an emotional weight that comes along with that that you just won't have when you are just watching someone else doing and you're not a active hands-on participant. You see, typically as you progress in your developer's career, you're going to want to eliminate some of the basic boiler code that goes along with various projects, whether it be a web application. You kind of want to already have certain things in place. You may want to leverage a back-end service that provides everything from beginning to end, so that all you have to focus on is the front end and integrating different features and different technologies. That's really where the space you ultimately want to get to. But once you are at that space and you're going towards that space, the things that you're going to learn and how quickly you digest things, it's going to slow down, because you have to get a better understanding of different concepts that you may not have been introduced to. And it's not just a shallow learn, it's going to be a learn that's going to require you to really understand what it is that you're doing, because you're having to integrate or mix in different technologies that you may not have experience with. So not only do you have to learn something that you've never been exposed to before, which is going to take some time, but now you have to figure out how to integrate this into whatever application that you're using. And that's going to take time as well. There's not always perfectly written documentation or tutorial that's going to walk you through these steps. A lot of the times you have to kind of sit down and figure these things out on your own. And this is why learning is going to be slower. And although you don't have that fast, immediate gratification, the slower this is and the more time that it takes, it's actually challenging you. And you actually are learning more throughout this process than you would if everything was handed to you and you didn't have to make as many judgment calls or as many decisions along the way. So, this is something that you actually want to be proud of and want to embrace. Although it may not necessarily feel good in the moment, this is the space that you want to be in from a learning perspective. You always want to find yourself being challenged and having to critically think and having to make decisions and having to make judgment calls. These are the things that you'll learn from. You know, the age old saying is that experience is the best teacher. This is no different. If you aren't exposed and have the right experience, you're not going to truly learn different concepts, different way to get things done, and develop a finished product, because you're just not used to going through those steps and going through that process. You've got to be willing to take that trade-off of that immediate quick win gratification for something that's a little more slower, something a little more methodical, something that's not going to be as immediate. That's where you're truly going to learn, and that's where you truly want to be from a programmer perspective, because that's what's going to ultimately get you through as the complexity of your projects continue to increase and features increase and different technology changes as things get updated and things are built to make things better. You've got to be willing to keep learning, keep going, because it's a never ending cycle. And the more that you can condition yourself to get prepared for that never ending cycle and get comfortable there, the better you're going to be as a developer overall. So just keep in mind that feeling slower is a sign of precision, not of failure. Make sure that you are carefully thinking and you are efficiently working through things. One of the best practices that I picked up on that it took me a while to actually learn is that it's okay to slow down and plan and read about how the technology works before you immediately try to dive into code. You know, if you're like me, you are pressed for time. A lot of times you don't have a lot of time to waste and spend on various things, so you have to be very strategic and efficient with your time. But with that, if you're trying to learn something new, the only way you're going to learn something is by practicing and spending time with being exposed and getting your hands dirty, if you will, in various concepts and various things. So find different ways to introduce yourself to something new that you may want to learn that you might not be familiar with. If you wanted to integrate some form of animation library into your project, those are typically easier to integrate. But if it's your first time doing so, maybe it's a good idea to spend 20, 30 minutes reviewing the documentation, understanding how the examples and the code work, understanding how to integrate it into your application or your framework before you actually write your first line of code. That way you have a baseline understanding of what it is that you're adding it to your application. You understand the trade-offs, if it's going to make your app faster, run slower, whatever it is, and whatever impact. You have a good understanding of that. And then after you have an understanding of it and you've taken a look at code examples, heck, maybe even look at someone else's GitHub repo. Usually documentations have examples of different GitHub repos that you can look at. Use that as a source of reference to say, hey, I see how they integrated this into this React framework or whatever framework it is that you're using. Now, before I add it into my project, let me just see how they put this in, how it was integrated. Are they using TypeScript? How does that impact? What version of the framework were they using? Is it compatible with the framework that I'm currently using or the version of the framework that I'm using now? These are things that you kind of want to have an understanding of before you dive into code. That way you could be better prepared and you could be more efficient with your code that you're writing versus trying to learn on the fly and integrate a new feature or product into your application that you have zero experience with. So I'm saying all that to say, be patient with yourself, give yourself some grace. Even when things and you feel slower and learning feels slower on your journey, it doesn't mean that you're getting worse. It doesn't mean that you're not being productive. It means that you're being more efficient and you're being more strategic, and you actually are becoming smarter in this process because you're challenging yourself more. You're exposed to things and you're slowing down to make sure that you are digesting whatever it is that you're consuming and not just grazing over it and moving 100 miles per hour. So be patient, give yourself that grace, and you'll start to realize that your thinking and your understanding of whatever it is that you're trying to tackle is going to be much deeper. I love to hear more about it in the chat and in the comments. So let me know the last time you had to remind yourself, just because I'm moving slower, it doesn't mean that I'm getting worse, and I'm actually getting better at whatever it is that I'm trying to do. Yeah, just mixing it up a little bit. I'll step away here in a little bit. I need to get that little boy of mine off the bus. Well, I don't need to, but I'm going to. Know where you are stopping by from. I would love to catch up with you. Just here to support each other, help each other get through tough times, and be a resource if anyone needs anything. But we are going to move along here. Let's get this thing set up. What does that look like? Let's move over here this time. Nope. I think right there works the best. So, look, I get it. It is absolutely tough not to compare yourself to someone else. But every time you start to compare yourself to someone else, there's a cost that you're putting on yourself that's invisible, that will begin to show up over time if it's not cared for properly, if you don't keep things in perspective, and if you allow that to dictate how you conduct yourself and how you if you allow that to dictate your passion and your drive as you're on your learning to code journey. So I want to kind of talk about why that takes place, what you should be looking for, and a healthy way to compare yourself to others so that you aren't deterring yourself on your own journey to learn code, but you're leveraging it as a source of inspiration and not so much as a bar that you necessarily need to live up to. So, look, comparing yourself is going to make your progress feel invisible. When you start comparing yourself to someone else, all of the hard work and all of the hours and the things and the sacrifices that you've made and you put into whatever it is that you're learning, you start to diminish that because you're allowing yourself to be compared to someone else versus comparing yourself to yourself. And I know that's a cliche that we hear all the time, that you should only be competing with the man or the woman in the mirror. However, that is a very, very true statement. And early when we're learning to code or we're learning anything for general in that matter, and we begin to expose ourselves to it and we get more and more immersed in that world, we start to compare ourselves to where others are, whether it be someone that's been coding for years or someone that might just be more efficient at understanding technical concepts than you, that started at the same space you did, but they may be moving along a little faster and further than you are. We tend to compare ourselves to those individuals as well. And the dangerous part of this is that as we're making those comparisons, if we don't have the appropriate expectation that we deem we should have, or we're not living up to that expectation, chances are we're going to start to lose our own confidence, not live up to our own standards. And worse, we could find ourselves transitioning away from what it is that we set out to do because we start to feel not good enough. We start to feel as if they're doing better than me and I'll never catch up. And we start to say things and we allow doubt to creep in as if, hey, if they're going for the same job I'm going for, they're going to get hired before me because they're better at doing whatever it is that I do. These are the things that you have to be aware of when you start comparing yourself to others, because naturally, when we compare ourselves to others, these are the feelings that we start to experience. And these feelings do not contribute to the momentum that you need in order to keep learning the code and to work through tough times. You see, we spend a lot of time on social media, and that's a very positive source of information for news, entertainment, technology, learning, you name it. Social media has a lot of great avenues that can be leveraged and when it's channeled in the right way. But what you ultimately are getting is years and years of experience in a few seconds, maybe a few minutes every time you consume certain type of educational content. You're going to see someone else's finished product that they've been working on for years and years, or they've been in the industry for years and years on end, and they're giving you a small condensed clip into whatever topic or subject that they're talking about that you're interested in. And if they're understanding something better than you are, you can't allow that to dictate how you feel about where you are in your own personal journey. Use that individual as a source of inspiration, not as a parameter or expectation of where you should be living up to as a developer. Everyone's journey and learning process is going to be different. Some of us are going to move a little faster and some of us are going to move a little slower than others. That's just the way it is in life. This industry is no different. We just have to continue to remind ourselves that as different things come up, we can't allow those things to dictate how we feel. Absolutely. AI is going to be able to make and write code faster than most of us because, heck, it can type faster than us. That's just a fact. But we do bring certain skill sets and certain things to the table that an AI agent of any sort just won't be able to compare to. Sure, they may be able to write better syntax, they may be able to help with design, they may be able to help with security, various things like that. But when it comes down to communication, when it comes down to implementation, when it comes down to logical thinking, that's where you're going to have an advantage over that tool or that resource that you may be using. But if you're allowing the author or the output of that tool to dictate how you feel because you're comparing yourself to it, you're setting yourself up for failure, and you're not setting yourself up for success. Usually what happens during this phase is you're going to take your motivation and that great feeling that you were previously experiencing, you're going to allow it to become discouragement and allow it to have you feel unmotivated to keep going because this agent or this person or this tool is going to be more efficient at certain things than you are, and that's what's going to discourage you from keep going. So be very, very careful when you are comparing yourself to someone else. Ultimately, what you want to do is use that person as a resource that you can leverage to give you a technical explanation or to provide clarity on a topic or a feature or whatever it is that you may not be sure of. Don't use that person as the person that you should be living up to. You don't want to find yourself comparing yourself and living up to someone else at all. If I were to compare myself to a senior engineer that's been coding for 30, 40 years, they help author the initial programming languages. There's no way that you're going to be able to compare to that individual. They were early adopter. They have more experience than you. Heck, they've probably been programming longer than you've been living in most instances. However, you've got to be confident enough to know that you bring different skill sets to the table, and you also bring something that they don't necessarily have to the table, whether it be your willingness to change, whether it be your willingness to adapt new technology, whether it be your willingness to learn and pick up on new concepts that someone that's been doing this for years and years on end with so much experience, they may be a little more reluctant because they may feel as if, hey, I've been doing this longer than this technology has been out. I'm going to be a lot more skeptical on adapting it, wherein you may be open-minded and a lot more willingness to embrace it and pick up on something new. That's going to be your advantage to an employer versus theirs.